Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amber HINDS, and we, for the next hour, are going to be talking about Medicaid planning for married couple situations. I want to just say Happy New Year to everybody. I hope 2020 is off to a great start for everyone. Again, my name is Amber HINDS. My maiden name is Amber GOUIN. You may recognize that. We may have worked together in my past life. I've now been married for almost 3 years, so my married name is HINDS. I've been working for the last 15 years with elder law and estate planning attorneys across the country on Medicaid compliant annuities. More recently, I'm only working with A-rated insurance carriers for all of the insurance needs of my clients. I'm insurance licensed across all states, and I hold a Series 65 license with FINRA. And I created ASHPR to help assist advisors as well as attorneys with pre-planning and crisis planning solutions that include insurance for your clients. If you have questions throughout the webinar today, feel free to post those in the GoToWebinar dashboard. You can also find a copy of today's handouts in the handout portion of the GoToWebinar dashboard as well. We're going to start out talking about the differences between pre-planning and crisis planning for long-term care. When we're talking about pre-planning or proactive planning for long-term care, this generally includes somebody that is a client that does not currently need assistance with activities of daily living. They're still healthy, and we don't anticipate them needing care for some time. Pre-planning is always going to be the best option for our clients because it allows them the most options to preserve their assets and to really make the best choices for their future as far as where they would receive care, whether that be at home, in assisted living, or in a skilled nursing facility. From a legal planning standpoint, pre-planning generally includes shifting the majority of your client's assets into an irrevocable trust and waiting out the 5-year look-back period for Medicaid purposes. And now the VA currently has a 3-year look-back period for transfers of assets as well. So from a legal standpoint, generally you're going to be looking at doing an irrevocable trust, but this can be problematic when we're dealing with clients that have a lot of pre-tax dollars or IRA dollars that we're looking to preserve, especially if you're planning an estate that IRAs are accountable asset. That can be problematic when we're trying to pre-plan for a client because we can't transfer pre-tax accounts into a trust without triggering tax consequences on the full account value. We, in a pre-planning scenario, because we have a healthy client that is still likely insurable, we would look at leveraging their assets with long-term care insurance policies, specifically hybrid policies. Alternatively, if we have a client that is not still healthy and is already in need of assistance with activities of daily living or already in a facility, then we're shifting over to a crisis planning scenario where we're trying to qualify the client for either Medicaid or VA benefits, and we're trying to essentially stop the bleeding or the cost that the family is incurring as quickly as possible. So we would use various strategies in a crisis scenario to convert countable assets for Medicaid or VA purposes into non-countable or exempt assets so that we can get that person eligible for benefits as quickly as possible so that they can relieve some of the financial burden that they're experiencing. When we look at the different ways to pay for long-term care, it can vary from a family just privately paying or self-insuring. So dollar for dollar, they're paying out of their existing assets to pay for their long-term care expenses. We can also look at long-term care insurance, either traditional policies or a hybrid model. Traditional policies are going to be similar to a client's auto or home insurance where there is no cash value, but it will be available when the person needs assistance with activities of daily living. There's no cash value on a traditional long-term care insurance policy, so that's going to be a use it or lose it type model, whereas a hybrid long-term care insurance policy is going to combine either a life insurance policy or an annuity policy with a long-term care rider, so that if the client doesn't actually end up needing to use the long-term care benefit, there will still be a death benefit or an account value that will be inherited by the intended heirs. The hybrid model is going to be a countable asset for Medicaid planning purposes because there is a cash surrender value associated to it. Also, if we have a client that is a veteran or a surviving spouse of a veteran who served at least 90 days of active duty, then we can look at the Veterans Aid and Attendance benefit to help provide additional income to pay for care. And then finally, we can look to Medicaid, which is going to be the payer of last resort when it comes to long-term care expenses. So today we're going to be talking specifically about crisis planning, and we're only going to focus on Medicaid planning. We're not going to be talking about the VA component in this webinar. When we look at the asset and income eligibility requirements for a married couple, on the asset side of the equation, an institutionalized spouse, the person that is looking to apply for Medicaid, is going to be able to keep in most states around $2,000 as their liquid resources that they can keep in their name. This does vary slightly by state, but most states is going to be around a $2,000 limit. A community spouse can generally keep 1/2 of the couple's resources up to $128,640. This is going to be the most updated number for 2020. Again, this does vary slightly by state, but most states do look at that 128 number. But again, if you're unsure about what your state does as far as that maximum limit, you can check our website at ashford.com to get the most recent numbers for your state. The income limitation for a married couple, when we're dealing with the institutionalized person, their income must be less than the cost of care. This isn't really all that hard to accomplish when we're looking at, in most states, the cost of care being anywhere from $6,500 up to $15,000 a month. Most of your clients are not going to have that type of income to offset their cost of care. So that's not a hard requirement to meet. But if you are planning in a state that is considered to be an income cap state, then you would also need to do either a qualified income trust or a Miller trust in order to offset the institutionalized person's income so that they're not over the $2,350 a month that they would be able to keep in their name. The community spouse, on the other hand, the spouse that is residing at home or is not in need of care, they can always have unlimited monthly income. There are 2 states, Illinois and New York, that impose a portion of the community spouse's income that must go towards the institutionalized spouse's income, but we'll cover that later in the webinar. There are other resources that will be considered protected or exempt in a Medicaid plan. Generally, that's going to include the client's home, their car, household goods and personal property, an irrevocable funeral trust or prepaid burial trust, and then some states will completely exempt the IRAs as well. So that's not, in some states, the IRA does not need to be spent down in order to qualify a client for Medicaid. If your clients have excess resources, we generally are going to develop a Medicaid eligibility plan, and that can include just simply paying off some of their existing debt, like credit cards, mortgages, any other debt that they have. If they have an outstanding bill at the nursing home, they can pay down their excess resources by paying those expenses. They can also purchase prepaid funeral or burial policies to spend down their assets. They can increase or improve non-countable assets if they have improvements that they want to make to their home, purchase a new car. These would all be acceptable spend down tools to use in order to spend down their assets. And after all of those items are exhausted, we can look at purchasing a Medicaid compliant annuity that complies with the Deficit Reduction Act of 2005. When we're looking at Medicaid planning with annuity contracts, a Medicaid annuity is always going to be a single premium immediate annuity. So this is not a tax deferred annuity. A tax deferred annuity has cash value or a surrender value that the client can go to the insurance company and they can request a liquidation or a cash surrender from a tax deferred annuity. A single premium immediate annuity, on the other hand, is simply a contract with an insurance company that is used to convert a countable lump sum of assets into an income stream. So as soon as the money is put into a single premium immediate annuity, there's no longer cash surrender value associated to that contract anymore. Now it's simply a stream of payments that the client is going to receive for either their lifetime or for a different period of time, but it is no longer considered to be an asset that the client can go to the insurance company and request a refund or cash surrender value from that policy. As a result of the DRA, immediate annuities must meet strict requirements, which we're going to go through. So I would caution you that there's hundreds of insurance companies out there that offer single premium immediate annuities. However, there's less than 10 different insurance companies at this point that offer a Medicaid compliant contract. So what does it mean to have a Medicaid compliant contract? All of the language that you're seeing on the screen in the blue bubbles would be the requirements that are needed in order for a SPIA to be considered a DRA compliant annuity. So the policy must be completely irrevocable, meaning that we can't change any aspect of the contract once the annuity is purchased. We can't change the payee, the duration of the annuity, the beneficiary. No aspect of the policy can be changed. The non-assignable language means that we cannot assign the annuity contract to a company like J.G. Wentworth or Peachtree, companies that buy annuities on the secondary annuity market. The contract must be completely non-assignable so that we can't shift the payments over or sell the contract on the secondary market. The actuarially sound requirement means that the annuity must pay out within the client's Medicaid life expectancy, but this can be structured for a shorter period of time than the full life expectancy. We also must have equal payments, meaning that we can no longer use a balloon style annuity when we're doing Medicaid planning, at least when we're using non-IRA dollars to purchase the annuity. So all of the payments must be equal over the term of the contract. And then finally, the state, in most states, must be the primary beneficiary to the extent that Medicaid benefits are provided. There's many different types of assets that can be used to purchase a Medicaid compliant annuity. On this screen, you're seeing all of the different types of assets that can be used to fund a Medicaid compliant annuity, including clients that have checking accounts, savings accounts, certificates of deposit, brokerage accounts, stocks, bonds, whole life insurance policies, non-qualified annuities, and IRAs or retirement accounts. If you are working with a client that has existing stocks or brokerage accounts, bonds, all of those accounts must be liquidated to a cash position before we can use it to purchase the Medicaid annuity. We can't do an in-kind transfer of stocks into a Medicaid annuity. So that's something to be aware of as far as the timing of purchasing the annuity. Whereas if we're looking at a client that has a whole life insurance policy or a non-qualified annuity that has substantial gain on the policy, we can look at doing a 1035 tax-free exchange of the existing life insurance or non-qualified annuity to fund the Medicaid compliant annuity. The advantage of doing the 1035 exchange is that instead of all of the money being taxed in 1 year or all of the gain in the contract being taxed in 1 year when we liquidate it, it would instead be spread out over the term of the contract if we do a 1035 exchange. And then finally, we can use IRAs or retirement accounts if you're planning in a state that counts the IRA or retirement account as a countable asset for Medicaid planning purposes. We're going to start by looking at a married couple situation where we have one spouse that is in a nursing home and the other spouse is remaining in the community or is at home. The goals when we're planning for a married couple is to, of course, obtain immediate Medicaid eligibility for the person that is in the facility. And we're going to accomplish that by converting countable excess resources into an income stream. There's a lot of scenarios where I deal with married couple situations that people get somewhat confused. They think that we're trying to incur a penalty period or privately pay for care during a penalty period. That's a common planning strategy when we're dealing with an individual person, but in a married couple situation, we're simply trying to get the institutionalized person on Medicaid as quickly as possible, and we don't want to trigger any kind of penalty period or ineligibility period when we're dealing with a married couple situation. The other goal in a married couple scenario would be to provide the community spouse with peace of mind that they're going to have sufficient income and resources to live on for their lifetime and protect them against needing to qualify for long-term care in their future. So we have Roger and Nancy. Our case facts are outlined on this slide here, where Roger is an 83-year-old spouse who's residing in a nursing home. He currently has dementia and he has monthly income of $2,000 per month. His nursing home bill is currently costing them $9,000 per month. Nancy is his community spouse who is residing at home, and she's 80 years of age with monthly income of $1,000 per month. The couple has a home, a car, and $300,000 of non-IRA bank accounts. If this couple does nothing at all, they will exhaust all of their life savings or the $300,000 within 33 months. So just over 2 years, they will exhaust the $300,000 by paying $9,000 per month on Roger's care. And when Roger passes away, Nancy will be left with nominal monthly income and nominal assets. So instead of simply spending this couple down until they don't have any more resources, we are going to qualify Roger for Medicaid. And first, we need to calculate what the spend down amount will be in this scenario. So Roger, as the institutionalized spouse, is going to be able to keep his personal property, a prepaid funeral policy, and $2,000 of the $300,000 of cash assets. Nancy, as the community spouse or the spouse that resides at home, is going to be able to keep the home, the car, a prepaid funeral policy, her personal property, and $128,640 of the $300,000 in cash assets. So if we deduct $130,640 from the $300,000 that the couple had in resources, we see that their spend down amount is $169,360. Do you know how we know that Nancy would be able to keep the maximum amount of $128,640? You may recall that in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned that in a married couple situation, the community spouse would be able to keep 1/2 of the total resources of the couple up to $128,640. So most states, with the exception of 11 states, and you'll see on the next slide which states do what, will have a minimum and a maximum community spouse resource allowance for purposes of determining how much the community spouse is able to keep. We're assuming in this scenario that Nancy resides in a state that does have a minimum and a maximum community spouse resource allowance. So if we divide the $300,000 of total resources that the couple has, we divide that in half, we're getting a number of $150,000. $150,000 is greater than the maximum amount of $128,640. So we know in this scenario, because they reside in a minimum maximum state, that Nancy would be capped at the $128,640. If we were looking at a situation where this same couple had $200,000 of resources and we were in a state that had a minimum and a maximum, and we divided that 200,000 by 2, then we would be looking at the couple being able to keep $100,000 of assets instead of the $128,640. There are 11 states that currently only have a maximum, and you're seeing on the screen here that the states that are in orange only have a maximum amount. So if you live in one of those states or you practice in one of those states, you don't have to do that same calculation of 1/2 of the resources. You just know that your clients are going to be able to keep the maximum community spouse resource allowance amount. So it makes it a little bit easier to plan in states that don't have that minimum maximum limitation, that extra calculation that you need to do. So we're going to look at how we eliminate the spend down amount of $169,360. We would do that by purchasing a Medicaid compliant annuity for Nancy. Nancy is the spouse that is residing at home, and she is going to be the annuity owner, the annuitant, and the payee of the annuity contract. With Nancy being 80 years of age, she has a remaining Medicaid life expectancy of almost 10 years. It's going to be 9.74 years or 116 months. Medicaid compliant annuities can only be purchased for a whole number of months. So in this scenario, I ran the calculation based on 116 months, and that's going to be the longest term annuity that we can purchase for Nancy based on her life expectancy. So if we look at 169,360 going into an annuity that's spread out over 116 months, the monthly payment on the annuity is going to be $1,500 per month for a total payout of $174,000 in the total payout. You'll notice that the total payout is slightly greater than the single premium, and that's simply just the interest that the insurance company is paying over the time frame of 116 months. Why is Nancy the spouse that's purchasing the annuity? As I mentioned earlier, in pretty much every state other than Illinois and New York, the community spouse would be entitled to unlimited monthly income without the community spouse having to contribute any of his or her income towards the institutionalized spouse's cost of care. If we are working in a state like New York or Illinois, it's a small portion of the community spouse's income that must be contributed towards the institutionalized person's care, but it's still a great result if you compare privately paying for a client versus qualifying them for Medicaid and having a small share of costs that needs to go towards the institutionalized spouse's care. So the main purpose of having Nancy be the spouse that's purchasing the annuity is that we can get all of that income that's generated off of the Medicaid annuity over to the community spouse, and it will affect what the monthly maintenance needs allowance calculation is by generating additional income. But the monthly maintenance needs allowance is going to be the amount of income that the community spouse is able to keep. This is not going to be an income limitation for the community spouse, but instead it allows the community spouse to receive additional income from the person that's in the facility if they don't have enough of their own monthly income. So that will become more clear when we look at the income calculations here, where we're calculating Nancy's monthly income now with the Medicaid compliant annuity payment of $1,500, and we're adding her Social Security income at $1,000 a month. So we are adding those two numbers together to get total monthly income for Nancy at $2,500 each month. We know, based on the state that Nancy lives in, that she has a monthly maintenance needs allowance of $3,200 or $3,216 per month of income that she would be able to keep. When we subtract out her monthly income, including the annuity of $2,500, we see that Nancy has a shortfall each month at $716 per month. So she, on Nancy's side of the equation, does not have sufficient income to meet what Medicaid considers to be the allowable income or the income threshold that she would be able to keep to help her meet her own expenses while residing at home. So when we're calculating what Roger is going to pay on his side of the equation, we're taking his income at $2,000 per month. That was his Social Security income, and we're subtracting out the amount that he's going to shift over to Nancy so that she can meet her expenses, and then also subtract out Roger's monthly personal needs allowance of $50 each month, so that his copay to the nursing home is going to be $1,234 per month. The economic results of doing the annuity structured over 116 months is that the couple was expected to pay $9,000 per month for Roger's care. We were able to reduce the copay down to $1,234 per month, so that the couple experienced a monthly savings of almost $7,800 per month by implementing the Medicaid compliant annuity in Nancy's name. The advantages of the plan is that we were able to obtain immediate Medicaid eligibility for Roger without incurring any kind of penalty period or private pay period that this couple needed to come out of their own pocket and pay for. We also created sufficient monthly income for Nancy through the Medicaid compliant annuity so that she could continue living in the community. The potential disadvantages in this case is that the state is most likely going to be the primary beneficiary to the extent that Medicaid benefits are provided on behalf of Roger. There are a couple of states that don't require the community spouse's annuity to name the state as a beneficiary. So that's kind of a situation where not many states allow for you to name whoever you want to as a beneficiary, but there are a couple. So in this case, we're going to assume that the state is the primary beneficiary to the extent that they provide Medicaid benefits. So assuming that Nancy would predecease the 116-month term, the state Medicaid agency is going to be entitled to the amount that they provided in Medicaid benefits on behalf of Roger, the spouse that is in the facility. In order to reduce the likelihood that the state would have a right to recover and that Nancy would predecease the annuity term, we could look at shortening the annuity to something less than her full life expectancy of 116 months. Let's assume that Roger, the institutionalized spouse, passes away 6 months after the Medicaid compliant annuity is purchased. What happens to the Medicaid compliant annuity? The answer is nothing at all. So this is another point that is kind of confusing for people when we're dealing with a married couple situation. We need to stay focused on the fact that Nancy is the annuity owner. She is the annuitant and she's the payee of the contract. So Roger passing away during the time frame that the Medicaid annuity is in place really has no impact on the Medicaid compliant annuity. So if you're dealing with a situation where the institutionalized spouse's health is somewhat questionable and the community spouse does not wish to be stuck in payments for the next 9 years at $1,500 per month, we could consider shortening the term of the Medicaid annuity contract so that Nancy will receive the funds back quicker and she's not waiting another 9 years to receive all the payments back and then do her own planning for her long-term care needs in the future. Now, if we assume that Nancy, the community spouse, passes away 6 months after the 116-month Medicaid annuity is purchased, now there will be implications of Nancy passing away because she is the annuity owner and she is the annuitant, meaning that she's the measuring life of the annuity contract. So if Nancy were to pass away after we implemented the Medicaid annuity, we would immediately notify the insurance company that we used for the annuity and notify them that Nancy passed away. With the state likely being named as the primary beneficiary of the annuity, the insurance company would reach out to the state Medicaid agency and confirm the amount that was provided on behalf of Roger, and they're going to be confirming what the Medicaid reimbursement rate was based on how long Roger was actually receiving care. The remaining Medicaid compliant annuity amount after the state is paid would be going to the couple's children as the contingent or secondary beneficiaries. And the children as the beneficiaries would be entitled to either receive a lump sum of cash or they can just continue to receive the payments for another 116 months. That would be a choice that the children would have once Nancy passes away and we actually have the beneficiary designation triggered on the annuity contract. So how did we determine the $131,764 number as far as the amount that the children would receive? We're taking the original amount that was used to purchase the annuity at $169,360. We're subtracting out the 6 months of payments that Nancy received during her lifetime or during the 6 months that she was alive, and that was $9,000. And then we're also going to subtract out the amount that Medicaid would have paid as the primary beneficiary. And again, that's going to be at the Medicaid reimbursement rate versus the full private pay rate, so that the amount that is received by the secondary beneficiaries or the children in this case is going to be $131,764. So this amount is going to be greater than if the family would have just privately paid at $9,000 per month for the 6-month time frame. The impact on the Medicaid compliant annuity when each spouse passes, we just went over the fact that the institutionalized spouse passing doesn't have a direct impact on the annuity policy, whereas when the community spouse, if the community spouse is the owner of the annuity, the state would be entitled to their payment, and then the secondary or contingent beneficiaries would be paid out after the state is repaid. Now we're going to look at shortening the annuity term. We're going to assume that Nancy doesn't feel confident that she's going to survive for the next almost 10 years or 116 months. So we're going to look at reducing the term down to a 24-month time frame. If we reduce the annuity to a 24-month time frame, we know that Roger's monthly income is going to remain the same at $2,000 because we aren't going to have the Medicaid annuity paying to Roger. By shortening the term on the annuity, we're essentially accelerating how quickly Nancy receives the MCA payments back. So by shortening the term, we're increasing the annuity payments. So instead of Nancy receiving monthly income of $1,500 from a 116-month annuity, she would instead receive around $7,100 from the Medicaid annuity over a 2-year time frame. with Nancy's total monthly income now being $8,100 when we include her Social Security income, she's no longer going to be entitled to any monthly income from Roger because her income now is exceeding the monthly maintenance needs allowance at $32.16 per month. So Roger's monthly copay to the facility is, instead of being $1,234 per month, it is now increasing up to the $1,950 per month. We got that number by, again, adding up what Nancy's monthly income would be by adding her Social Security and the Medicaid annuity payment at $7,100, so that her total income is $8,100. And we see in the lower left-hand corner that because Nancy's income at $8,100 per month exceeds her monthly maintenance needs allowance at $32.16, she no longer has a monthly income shortfall. So now, instead of shifting any of Nancy's income over to, shifting Roger's monthly income over to Nancy, we see that Roger's income is the $2,000 from Social Security less his personal needs allowance, so that we see his copay to the facility is at $1,950 per month. We're going to even further reduce the Medicaid annuity down to a 2-month time frame and see what that looks like as far as the income that would be generated off of the annuity. Again, Roger's monthly income remains at $2,000, and by shortening the annuity term down to a 2-month time frame, we're seeing that that increases the monthly payments on the annuity to $84,700 per month. When we add Nancy's other income from Social Security at $1,000, we see that her total income is $85,700, and we know that that amount is exceeding the monthly maintenance needs allowance, so she's not going to receive any of Roger's income, so his copay is going to remain at $1,950 per month. So while a 2-month Medicaid compliant annuity is technically going to be considered actuarially sound for Medicaid planning purposes because we are paying out the annuity within Nancy's Medicaid life expectancy, I would caution you that these high annuity payments can be viewed as abusive by your Medicaid office. So when determining the term of the annuity, there's a lot of different factors that I would take into consideration to determine how long we want to structure the annuity and what's kind of considered to be a reasonable amount of income that's generated off of the annuity. I like to use a rule of thumb that if the cost of care in your state is $15,000 a month and there is a chance that the community spouse would potentially need to qualify for long-term care, then we could justify creating $15,000 a month from the annuity contract. But if you're residing in a state that only costs $6,500 a month, then it may be more unreasonable to create additional monthly income that we don't necessarily need. So I would just look at several different factors when we're determining how long the annuity contract would be, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're creating $250,000 of monthly income over a 2-month time frame, because that can look abusive and can just cause more problems than it is good. So in summary, if we look at shortening the annuity term, that is always going to, by shortening the term, that's going to increase the amount of the Medicaid compliant annuity payment. It's going to decrease the likelihood that the income will be shifted from the person in the facility over to the community spouse under the monthly maintenance needs allowance. And it also is going to decrease the likelihood that the state would have a right to recover against the annuity contract, because the quicker the community spouse receives payments back from the annuity, the less likely that the beneficiary designation will ever need to come into play. Here's a list of factors that I would take into consideration when we're determining the best length for a community spouse annuity. I would consider the health of both spouses in the situation that we went through. When we think about if the institutionalized spouse passes shortly after the annuity is purchased and the community spouse won't receive the payments back for a very long period of time, they may not be all that thrilled about receiving $1,500 a month for 9 years. Whereas if we shorten that to a lesser time frame, it may make the family happier as far as all the different considerations that should be thought about when we're looking at how long to structure the annuity. So we're going to look at the health of both spouses. We're also going to consider the spend down amount. So a case that where we're spending down $500,000 or $50,000 is going to look different. I wouldn't recommend a very short time frame on $500,000, a 2-month time frame, but you could maybe consider a 6-month time frame on $50,000. So that's something that I would look at as well on a case-by-case basis. And then also looking at the couple's monthly income. If the goal is to shift monthly income from the person that is in the facility over to the community spouse, then we're likely going to want to stretch out the annuity payments over a longer period of time than doing a very short-term annuity. We would also consider how quickly the community spouse needs the money back, either for their own long-term care plan or just how quickly they need additional income. And then also I would consider the type of funds that are being used to purchase the annuity, whether it's after-tax dollars or pre-tax dollars. IRAs or tax qualified plans, it's important to know whether your state considers IRAs or tax qualified plans that are owned by the community spouse to be accountable resource. Some states, these accounts are already a protected or an exempt asset, so there's not any real need to do additional planning. But if you are living in a state where the community spouse's qualified account or retirement account is accountable asset, we can help to convert that into a tax qualified Medicaid compliant annuity. Here you're seeing a map of the different states that consider the community spouse's IRA to be accountable asset. So all of the states here in blue do consider the community spouse's retirement account to be accountable, whereas the states that you're seeing in orange consider the community spouse's IRA to be an exempt resource. So in the orange states, you don't have to do additional planning because the IRA that's owned by the person at home is already an exempt resource that you don't need to do additional planning for. IRAs or tax qualified plans can be spent down by the client either doing a trustee to trustee transfer or a 60-day rollover to fund a Medicaid compliant annuity. When I said that I would consider the term of the annuity based on whether we're using after-tax dollars or pre-tax dollars, it's important to think about the fact that when we fund the Medicaid compliant annuity with IRA dollars, it's not going to cause a taxable event when we do the funding if we use a 60-day rollover or a trustee to trustee transfer. But as the annuity makes payments, that is going to be considered taxable income to your client. So it wouldn't necessarily be in your client's best interest to do a tax qualified Medicaid annuity right now in January and pay out the annuity in an 8-month time frame, because all of the tax consequences are still going to be incurred in the year of 2020. Whereas if we stretch out the time frame on the Medicaid annuity over multiple tax years, then we're spreading out how quickly the client is actually going to be taxed on those annuity payments. So it's not usually all that common to use a very, very short time frame on an IRA Medicaid compliant annuity, because you're just taxing the payments quicker than if we stretch it out over a longer period of time. We're going to consider the timing or the steps that we use to secure Medicaid eligibility through the use of a Medicaid compliant annuity. Generally, we first want one spouse to enter a facility so that we're able to establish a snapshot date or the first continuous period of institutionalization. After one spouse has entered a facility, we can then determine what the spend down amount is. And then thirdly, we can purchase the annuity with this excess spend down amount or the excess resources. And after the Medicaid annuity has been purchased, you would complete the Medicaid application and submit that to your state Medicaid agency so that the client can secure Medicaid eligibility by using the annuity. Medicaid compliant annuities are never considered to be a pre-planning tool or used before one spouse enters a facility. The reason being is that the Medicaid annuity is irrevocable and is non-assignable. So there's a lack of flexibility once the annuity is purchased. I wouldn't recommend purchasing a Medicaid annuity for somebody that might need to qualify for Medicaid 2 or 3 years down the road. It's definitely a tool that's used once one spouse enters a facility, and we want to be aware that if we're working in states that have a minimum and a maximum community spouse resource allowance, that we are doing the annuity purchase after the spouse has been placed in a facility. Because if we do the annuity before the snapshot date or before the first continuous period of institutionalization, the couple is not going to be able to keep the full community spouse resource allowance, and it will essentially result in having to do a second spend down because we purchased the annuity too soon. What about the insurance carrier as far as issuing the Medicaid compliant annuity? Every insurance company is going to be rated by different agencies such as Moody's, AM Best, S&P. They're going to be rated on a scale from A+ down to a D based on how many assets they have under management and how likely it is that the insurance company is going to be able to pay the claims that they're required to pay. So it's important to look at the rating of the insurance carrier when your clients are considering purchasing the annuity, and especially looking at longer term annuities. You want to make sure that the insurance company is going to be around to actually satisfy the claims on the annuity. So I usually look at how long the insurance company has been around and what kind of assets they're dealing with as far as the likelihood that they're going to be able to pay the claim. Especially if you're looking at longer term annuities, the rating is going to be more important than if you're talking about an annuity that would be paid out within the next 2 or 3 months. On very short term annuities, the rating isn't going to be as much of a concern as on longer term annuities that the client might be receiving payments for the rest of their life. Also, I would consider looking at what your state guarantee association, which is similar to FDIC insurance, what their coverage amount is. Most states will cover your state guarantee association will cover up to $250,000 or $300,000 on annuity contracts. So this is in the event that an insurance company would go under as far as satisfying the claim that basically reimbursing the client for the amount that they had with an insurance company that is no longer in existence. And also, if you're working with a licensed insurance agent, whether you're licensed or you're working with somebody locally, a lot of errors and omissions contracts don't cover an agent if the insurance company is rated B or less. So that's another consideration to think about when you're dealing with looking at different insurance companies that would be chosen for the Medicaid compliant annuity. So why would you choose to work with ASHPR? I have over 15 years of experience working with elder law attorneys across the country. We do complementary case analysis as far as helping you to determine the type of assets that could be annuitized and the optimal annuity amount, the term that the clients would consider. We only work with A-rated insurance carriers, like I mentioned, and we offer top-notch customer service to all of the agents and attorneys that we work with. And it does look like we have some time left for questions. Let me see if we have any. Okay, it does look like we have several questions, but most of them are state-specific questions. So I'm actually going to reach out to people individually to answer these questions based on what your state does in regards to IRAs or being a minimum maximum state for purposes of determining the community spouse resource allowance. So look for an email from me later today and I'll answer these questions directly. I want to thank everybody for their time today, for joining me, and I hope that you'll join us next month in February for another webinar dealing with Medicaid planning for an individual client, and that one will be in the middle of February as well at the same time, 12 o'clock Eastern time. So look for an email with information for the next webinar. I want to thank everybody again and have a great day.